Are you someone addicted to social media? If the answer is yes, then you need to hear this entire story, because the story we're bringing you today comes from a female content creator who lived almost entirely in the digital world. Until the day she died, at the very moment her soul left this world, God received her and took her through a journey of revelation about something silently killing an entire generation. There, he unveiled a raw and unsettling truth about technology, a truth that could leave anyone who hears it in absolute shock. So, what exactly was it? Watch until the end, because this might be the very thing God wants you to see today. And if something stirs in your heart, don't hesitate to share your thoughts with us. Welcome to Eternal Bible Stories, where real near-death experiences are told to awaken faith and illuminate the soul. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it now and leave your name and the city you're watching from in the comments, so that God knows you're watching and ready to receive His blessings. Now, listen closely to her story. My name is Rosie, and what I'm about to share with you completely changed everything I thought I knew about our modern world. Before I tell you what God revealed to me about technology during my near-death experience, I need you to understand that I used to be just like you, completely immersed in our digital age, with my phone practically an extension of my hand. What happened next took place on November 13th, 2023. Just 5 more minutes, I muttered to myself as I scrolled through my social media feed while walking along a crowded sidewalk in Sydney. The thick morning fog created a hazy atmosphere that I barely noticed, too absorbed in my screen. I was already late for a marketing team meeting, but the latest viral video had me hooked. That's the last thing I remember before everything changed. Later, they told me that a delivery truck had run a red light. The impact was instant. I didn't even see it coming. In that split second, my physical body was thrown 20 feet across the intersection, but my consciousness, that's where the real journey began. The first sensation was floating. Not the gentle kind you feel in a swimming pool, but a powerful upward pull, as if the very essence of me was being drawn out of the broken body below. I watched from above as paramedics rushed to where my body lay on the pavement, their movements urgent but seemingly happening in slow motion. My phone was shattered nearby, its screen still glowing with the last video I'd been so entranced by. But that scene quickly faded. The physical world dissolved into a tunnel of the purest light I had ever experienced. People who've had near-death experiences often describe this light, but no words can truly capture its essence. It wasn't just brightness. It was living knowledge, pure love, absolute understanding, all woven together into something visible and real. As my physical body lay motionless on earth, my soul slowly drifted into a realm that no human language could ever describe. I no longer felt pain, fear, or confusion, but only found myself being drawn into a stream of light so pure and alive, not only radiant but soaked with understanding, love, and truth. It was not physical light like the sun or electric bulbs, but the light of life itself, sentient light that welcomed me home as if I had belonged there for eternity. Within that light, I felt myself enveloped by a presence so gentle and majestic that it overwhelmed me, as if the entire universe were embracing me with unconditional love. Every mistake, every shame, every scar on my soul, all dissolved in that love, not because they were hidden, but because they were fully seen and completely forgiven. I understood instantly, without anyone having to explain. I was standing before God, but not the stern image I had once imagined from sermons or paintings, but a being who loved me so deeply that there was no room left for condemnation. He didn't need to speak a single word, because everything he wanted to communicate came directly into my mind in waves of pure and powerful thought, making me feel as if my entire soul was opening up. as if every part of who I was being illuminated and healed by that light. He knew everything I had ever done, every thought I had ever had, every fear I had buried, every secret I had kept. But he didn't turn away, didn't scold, didn't judge. He simply opened his arms to receive me like a child returning home. That presence did not take on a specific form, but I felt as though it had assumed a shape adjusted to the limits of my understanding, as if he had condensed himself just enough for me to bear the weight of his greatness. Within him, I sensed the gentleness of a father, the wisdom of the Creator, and the tenderness of a mother cradling her child after a nightmare. I had heard about the love of God, had sung of it in worship gatherings, but only at this moment did I truly know, with my entire soul, that this love was unlike anything else in this world. I didn't want to leave this place, didn't want to return, didn't want to lose this moment of being in such a living and radiant presence, as if everything I had ever searched for, ever dreamed of, ever chased throughout my life was wrapped in this invisible yet complete embrace of his. But then, within that light, I sensed his gaze. Not angry, but full of solemnity. It pierced me, reached into the depths of my conscience, and I knew he was asking me without words, "Why were you so consumed by your phone that you didn't watch the road? Had you forgotten how precious the life I gave you truly is?" And then I heard a voice, not by sound, but a clear thought rising from deep within me. "Welcome home, my beloved child." But now it carried a deeper meaning. Not only unconditional love, but also a gracious awakening. My heart melted, not just because I was received, but because I saw clearly my own naivety. I had traded the living presence of real life just to chase after a fleeting illusion. All I knew was this: I had met him who loved me, and also corrected me, so that I might awaken and live a life worth living. Follow me, there is something you must witness. I was taken into a series of visions that, to this day, I still don't know how to fully describe in words. It wasn't like any dream or human imagination. It was a form of living understanding, where I didn't just see, but also felt the entire range of emotions and deep meanings hidden behind each image. God didn't just show me the history of humanity's technological development. He allowed me to relive the entire journey of evolution, from when our ancestors first used a stone as a tool, to the era of electrification, computers, and then every phase carried joy, hope, and potential. But I could also sense a subtle shift taking place through the process, a deviation that served life. Technology began to transform into an invisible force that governed human emotions, thoughts, and even souls. And when that vision ended, I could only whisper in my heart, "Oh Lord, what is truly happening to us?" God didn't respond. He led me to another image, radiant gold everywhere, connecting people to each other, families to families, communities to communities, and all leading back to the source of light, himself. These threads were not physical but symbolic of the love, empathy, true presence, and spiritual connection. I saw nearly identical, but lacking light, lacking sacred vitality. They were networks of virtual connections that people mistook for closeness, but in reality were only shadows of the sacred essence that had been lost. These new threads didn't lead to God, didn't nourish the soul, but instead pulled people further away from the living, loving presence they once had with each other and with him. I realized that the greatest danger does not lie in technology itself, but in the fact that we can no longer distinguish what is real from what is fake. And that is exactly how darkness creeps in. It doesn't come through threats, but through perfect imitation. Then I saw the faces of millions of people, of all ages, races and backgrounds, but what they all had in common was that their eyes were glued to a small screen, their faces lit up under the bluish glow of their phones. But the spiritual light within them was fading, like a candle about to go out in a room no one takes care of anymore. Every time the phone buzzed, every like, every comment, every notification, it all produced a fleeting rush of excitement but left nothing behind for the soul. I felt a deep spiritual hunger covering this generation, a generation that thinks it is more connected than ever before, but in reality is being severed from its own self, from those around it, and from the divine calling of God. Love is being replaced by attention, true presence is being replaced by virtual presence, and the soul is slowly withering away while no one realizes they are dying inside a world full of connection. God continued to show me a comparison, a vision of two scenes, as if placing two souls on a scale. On one side I saw two friends sitting across from each other in a small cafe. No phones, no notification sounds, only eye contact, laughter and genuine listening. Between them, I saw a stream of light flowing like a gentle river, moving back and forth between their souls, making both of them shine with a kind of radiance that could only come from something holy. But on the other side, there were two people sitting alone in two separate rooms, phones in their hands, and beside them a list of thousands of online friends, yet the light within their souls was weak, dim, like a lamp about to go out. They were not lonely because of a lack of people. They were lonely because of a lack of real connection, a lack of true presence, a lack of spiritual resonance that only sincere interactions can awaken. And I understood. We are not hungry for technology. We are hungry for true love, true presence, and the true God. At that moment, I heard the voice of God, not in words, but as a truth that pierced straight into my soul. The problem is not the tool. The problem is that humanity has forgotten the difference between connection and connection. I heard the emphasis clearly, as if a divine capital letter C had been printed boldly in my mind. People today chase after numbers, how many followers, how many likes, but they forget that a real hug, a shared look, a whispered prayer beside a loved one has the power to heal far deeper than any message ever could. We are living in a world full of noise, full of information, yet we are listening less and less to the whisper of God within our hearts. And if we do not wake up, we will lose ourselves in a world where everything is lit, except the soul. The one that made me tremble, choke with emotion, appeared. It was a picture of the future, not something certain, but a path that humanity is quietly walking into. In that world, human consciousness had been completely fragmented. No one could focus long enough to pray, to feel, or to hear the voice of God. Every few seconds, something pulled the mind away. Video, news, notifications, messages, advertisements. The mind was no longer still, no longer had space, no longer had sacred room for God to dwell. Digital waves had distorted the spiritual signal, causing people to no longer hear the call of the Creator. But then, right within that frightening scene, I sensed something I believe is humanity's greatest hope. God is still calling, still waiting, still loving, even if no one can hear him clearly anymore. After the visions about technology had faded, I thought my journey of revelation had ended, but God in his boundless mercy did not let me leave without witnessing one more thing, a silent, painful truth that needed to be revealed. He didn't say anything, only transmitted a stream of thought into me. I will show you those who are unable to leave, not because I rejected them, but because they themselves cannot let go of what bound them to the world. And then, as if stepping through an invisible door, I found myself being led to an entirely different place. Not heaven, not hell, but a space that lay between the two realms. A borderland for souls that had not yet chosen the path they would take. The scene was eerily silent. There were no cries, no screams, but there was also no light. Not a thick darkness, but a sorrowful grey, as if the sky could never brighten, yet never truly rain either. There I saw hundreds, perhaps thousands of souls, not chained, not imprisoned by demons, yet still unable to move forward. They wandered in circles, sat in silence, or stood still as if waiting for something that would never come. The Lord gently said, "These are the ones who departed too suddenly, too meaninglessly, that their minds could not accept the truth that they had died. They were not rejected by me, but they themselves had bound their souls with obsession." And then I began to recognize individual faces. Many of them had died for reasons that seemed trivial, yet those moments had severed them from life in a way no one could have expected. A young girl kept staring at her hand. In it was a cracked phone, half of the screen still glowing. She kept whispering over and over, "Just one more photo, just one more story." In another corner, a middle-aged man was repeatedly pressing an invisible button, as if trying to send one final message that he never got to send. Nearby, a boy far too young had his head resting on his knees, his eyes still fixed on a device I couldn't quite see, but I could feel the chaotic, painful, and regretful energy radiating from his soul. They refused to leave, not because they were being judged, but because they couldn't let go of their final moment, a moment they knew, deep down, could have been avoided. And then, in that silence, I saw Jenna. She sat alone, her gaze not toward me, but toward the intersection where she had lost her life, as if trying to reverse time. I walked closer, my heart tightening at the sight of that face, my best friend, now seemingly trapped between two worlds. She wasn't blaming anyone, but her eyes said it all. I wasn't ready. I didn't want to die because of a phone call. I had too many things left unfinished, and I understood. She, like so many others in this place, was not stuck because God had cast her out, but because she hadn't yet been able to forgive herself for the moment she lost herself. They died without understanding why, and when they finally did understand, they couldn't accept that truth. God let me feel that pain. Not to frighten me, but to help me empathize and remember forever that no death is small if it cuts through a life in motion, that every distracted moment, every careless choice can leave a permanent consequence, not just for the one who departs, but for their soul after. And then his voice rang within me, slowly, gently, yet with solemn authority. Remind them that life is a gift and attention is a sacred act. Do not give it to meaningless things. Live awake, for every moment is more sacred than they realize. Just as the vision of the dark future came to a close, I thought only despair would remain, but it didn't. In the spiritual darkness of a generation torn apart by digital noise, I felt a faint yet powerful light rise from the depths of human existence. God didn't just show me what is destroying our souls, He also showed me the way back, a path that, if we are willing to turn around, will open a season of spiritual restoration unlike anything we've ever seen. In the next vision, I saw families beginning to have device-free dinners. No phones, no TV, no iPads, only laughter, conversation, and eyes meeting each other. I saw communities establishing quiet hours each day, where people would turn off their phones, sit in silence, and listen to God's whisper within their souls. I saw young people returning to nature, to real conversations, to whispered prayers in the stillness of midnight, and their spiritual light flared up like a candle, newly shielded from the harsh wind. I realized hope doesn't lie in destroying technology, but in putting it back in its rightful place, at the feet of God, not on the throne of the human heart. I saw young people, those once drowning in depression, anxiety, and attention disorders, beginning to experience slow but profound healing, not from pills or therapy, but from real presence, real love, and the living Word of God. I saw them removing their online masks, revealing fragile souls longing for true connection, and it was in that vulnerability that they found themselves again. Meditation apps, when used correctly, became doorways into the quiet places where God's voice rang clearer than ever. Social media, instead of a space of competition and comparison, became a tool to reconnect those who had been lost in the storm of information. I saw worship gatherings where people laid down their phones, lifted their eyes, and together entered God's presence without distraction. In that world, technology didn't disappear, but it bowed before life instead of demanding to rule it. And I understood, God doesn't want to take away our technology. He just wants to take back our hearts from its grip. God showed me clearly that the key lies in awakening, in each person's ability to pause amid the busy flow and ask the question, am I truly connecting or just being swept away? When I asked God, what should I say to them, to this generation, the answer came like a stream of crystal clear water. Not a sermon, not a threat, just a powerful and loving invitation. He said, tell them to look up. Tell them to look into each other's eyes. Tell them to remember what it feels like to be loved, to be present, to truly live. And I knew that is exactly what this generation is missing. Not information, but the living presence of love and of God in each moment. Every time we choose a real conversation instead of texting, choose silent prayer instead of scrolling, choose to look into a loved one's eyes instead of at a notification, that's a moment where we reopen a live channel between our soul and heaven. True connection doesn't need Wi-Fi, it needs an awakened heart. And in every such moment, convenience and intelligence have unknowingly traded the most sacred thing we ever had, the living presence of God and of each other. We've been chasing things that look like connection, social media, messages, notifications, but in truth, they are just shiny masks hiding an ever-growing emptiness in our hearts. And now God is calling. He is not asking us to throw away our phones, leave the modern world behind, or go back to ancient times. No, He simply wants us to put it down just for a moment and look up, to remember who we are, where we come from, and what we were made to live for. He is inviting us to step back into love, Real love, not through theory, doctrine, or fleeting emotion, but through small yet powerful actions. Turning off our phones for 10 minutes each morning to whisper a thank you. Looking into the eyes of our loved ones when we speak, being truly present, undistracted. Taking a few quiet moments to breathe, to listen, to live deeply, not out of obligation, but because that is where God is waiting for us. And if you do that, even just once, I believe you'll hear Him too, not with your ears, but with an inexplicable warmth, a deep and unmistakable knowing. You'll feel the light, not from a screen, but from within, and you'll know, not with your mind, but with your soul, that the way back is always open. You just have to take the step. My return was nothing like the gentle departure of my soul. It came as a shock, as if I were being yanked back into my body in a violent yet necessary way. I woke up in the hospital 3 days after the accident, overwhelmed by the bright ceiling lights and the tear-streaked faces of my family gathered around me. They burst into tears as I opened my eyes, while I could only grasp my mother's hand, not out of fear, but because I knew I had just returned from the holiest place I had ever entered. The doctors called it a miracle. With the number of broken bones, severe internal injuries, and brain trauma I had sustained, they had no explanation for how I could recover so quickly. But I knew the truth. The real miracle wasn't my survival. It was the message I had brought back from the divine realm. I was no longer the same person, and I couldn't live the same way anymore. From that moment, I understood that every breath I took was a new opportunity to live awake, to love deeply, and to connect truly. Things I had neglected while glued to a screen. I set boundaries for screen-free moments. Mornings are reserved for God, where I pray, read the Bible, or simply sit in His presence, without a single notification interrupting. I prioritize face-to-face conversations, real hugs, and uninterrupted eye contact. I've learned to listen, not just to others, but to the gentle whisper of God that lives in the silences I never used to notice. These changes didn't come from pressure or rules, they came from a divine urging, because I know it's in that stillness that the sacred thread between me and Him is sustained. I began sharing my story in churches, schools, and communities, not to gain attention or offer fleeting inspiration, but to plant a gentle yet urgent wake-up call in people's hearts. We are losing the most precious thing we have: presence. I met young people battling depression, couples feeling lonely under the same roof, and parents who could no longer hear their children's voices because both were being swallowed by screens. I didn't tell them that technology is evil. I simply shared the truth I had seen. When technology is put in the wrong place, it ceases to be a tool and becomes an idol. And every idol demands sacrifice. Sometimes it's time, sometimes it's peace, and worst of all, it can be the sacred connection with God. I kept the shattered piece of my phone from that day, not as a regret, but as a daily reminder that I had once been consumed by this, and God had pulled me out, not just to survive, but to truly live. Now, every time I look into someone's eyes as they share the emptiness they feel after hours of endless scrolling, I understand that feeling, because I've been there. And I also know that on the other side of that emptiness lies a door to real presence, real love, and real life, if they're willing to look up. I don't share this message to scare or blame. I share it because I was rescued, and because God wants as many people as possible to return to the sacred experience they were created for. Every small choice we make in a day, silencing the phone at dinner, praying before sleep, having a real conversation instead of texting, is a step toward the light. No one needs to abandon technology, but we all must abandon our spiritual dependency on it. And if you're reading these words, maybe you too are being called not to shut off your device, but to open your heart, open your eyes, and return to what truly matters: love, presence and God. So Rosie's story has come to an end, and if you're still listening at this point, I truly believe it's not by accident. God has a message for you. He wants to remind you that you are not created to live in digital noise, not meant to scroll aimlessly through endless screens, but to connect deeply with yourself, with others, and with Him. He is still calling, but we have become too busy, too distracted to hear. And now, He's using Rosie's story to reach your heart. I'm not saying you have to give up technology. I still use it. This message is shared through it. But what I've learned is that technology is a tool, not a destination. It can never replace a loving gaze, a real hug, a quiet prayer, or the true presence of God in a peaceful morning. Every time you choose a real conversation over a text, a prayer over a scroll, you are reopening a sacred connection that's been dormant for far too long. If your heart sank just a little during these last few seconds, please, don't ignore that. Leave a comment below if you feel awakened, or simply share how this made you feel, because perhaps the words you type today could be the light that guides another wandering soul. And don't forget to hit subscribe to continue journeying with eternal Bible stories, where true testimonies are shared, not just to be heard, but to heal and bring you closer to God. May heavenly love cover you always.